You may have seen this video appear on social media over the last few days about water not soaking away on very hard, sort of very dry grass. Well, I thought I'd walk around to the local park and try this out, and then I thought, well, we'll see if we can work out what's happening in the lab. As you can see, I've turned this upside down and basically no water is really coming out of this into the ground. We can't see really anything happening at all, and this is going to stay like this for quite a few minutes. Well, we can see occasionally we're getting some bubbles as the water is coming out of this very slowly into the ground, but basically it's not being absorbed at all into this ground where it's so hard and so dry. Another way we can do this is just to let the water go and see what happens. So if I lift this up and let the water out, the water literally stays on the surface of the grass and doesn't soak in. After 5 minutes or so, I've got another sample which is here, just over the side, and that has still got surface water on it, and it hasn't soaked in after 5 minutes. Whereas the one I've just put in, you can see it is drifting around a little bit, but this is just like a puddle on asphalt. The water is not soaking in to the land at all. Now I've returned to the lab, we're going to see if we can do the same experiment again, but under more controlled conditions. I don't have any grass here, but what I do have is I do have this cloth. Now, you may have noticed that if you ever try to sort of mop up some liquid, that a dry cloth doesn't seem to work as well as a wet one. And perhaps this goes some way to explain what's actually going on with our water outside and not being absorbed. So let's take this cloth, and I'm just going to cut it in half. It's the same cloth, so it should have exactly the same properties. And I'm going to make 3 of them, and so I do have another cloth that I'm just going to cut out, and we're going to have 3 to choose from. We're going to have one that's going to be dry. I'm going to move that one out of the way just for the time being. We're going to have one that's going to be damp, and so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to put that in to some water, and this is damp. I'm going to try and squeeze out every last bit of water I can out of this, just so it is basically just damp. So there we are, there's our damp one. This one's going to be sopping wet, so I'm just going to put this one in. This is almost like waterlogged soil. I will have to just stop it a little bit, but this one now is very wet. And you can see there is a slight colour difference between them. I'm just going to dry my hands because I don't want to try and get the dry one wet. And so here is our dry one. Now we want some test tubes with water in them. I use even the same water, and I'm going to fill these right up to the top, and I can only do one at a time. So I'm going to use the same piece of plastic I used on the cup outside on the field, but I'm not going to use the cup this time because I don't have enough space to do it. And we're just going to put this one over. Now it takes a little bit of practice to get this one over, and I've got to get it in the right place so it will come out. There we are. and that's on dry, and you can see it's not really going very quickly. Let's put it onto the damp one, and I did the dry one first because it's going to take so much longer. I'm going to put this one over again, and we'll put this one on the wet one. I'll try and balance it. So that one's now on the wet one, and we can see immediately there are some bubbles coming up, which we don't seem to have on this one. We've got a very wet one over there, so I'm just now going to set this one up. There's a lot of water being spilt over this side. And here is my super duper wet one. And we're going to put that one out there. So what we now have to do is watch what's happening. Well, it appears, looking from on top, that this one's barely spreading out at all. This one here, I've got the occasional bubble coming up, which is suggesting that the liquid is actually being replaced by air, so it's going faster. And the very wet one, well, I'm sad to say that's not doing anything. And that's what I would expect, because this is already absolutely sodden. So there's nowhere for the water in here to go. This one is, however, bubbling up. The water level is going down, and we can see that it's going down. And we can, in fact, then measure the rate of this. If I change this into a measuring cylinder, then I could actually measure the rate at which the water goes down. And the one on dry, well, it's just not moving. So for what we're doing here, we've got exactly the same cloth. So the pores are exactly the same size, and the only difference between these cloths is the amount of water on them. The dry one, it's not taking up any water really at all. Right round here it is absolutely dry. It's only slightly wet just around the very edge of the test tube. This one's gone down quite a bit, but the very wet one, the water's got nowhere to go. And so we've got a situation that you'd find in nature where you've got a water table where everything is so full of water, there's nowhere for the water to go, so it just stays really above or in the ground. So this is almost like a flood, I suppose, with the water on top, where nowhere for the water to go. And that one, of course, still not doing anything. But if so, we want to look at here the damp cloth. If you want to pick up any water, it would appear that a damp cloth picks up a lot more water than a dry one.